Semester of SunoikisisDC. This semester focuses on digital classics and Byzantine studies, and this session is focused on the material context of text-bearing objects. This will range from classical and Byzantine epigraphy and sigillography to Ethiopic manuscript studies, and think about some of the issues that these have in common, and questions of materiality of the objects, context of the objects, and so forth, in addition to and in combination with the editions of the texts that in ancient languages that are usually on these objects. Our speakers today for the session are Martina Filosa from the University of Köln and Daria Elagina from the University of Hamburg, both of whom have recently written seminal articles on exactly this subject, which you can find in the reading lists underneath this session. There's a link underneath the video to that session description, and there will be some discussion after the main presentations. There are also a couple of suggested exercises on that page that's linked down there. Those of you who are watching us live, welcome. We're delighted to have you there. If you'd like to use the live chat feature next to the video to say hi and tell us where you're watching from, that would be fantastic. Please also use the live chat to ask any questions that you may have, make comments, and join the discussion, which we will have at the end of the session. Welcome also to those of you watching us in the future. We're not in live discussion with you, but we very much appreciate the fact that you're watching as well. I think that's all I want to say by way of introduction. I will hand over to Martina, who I believe is starting us off. Please, Martina.
Thank you so much, Gabby, for the kind introduction. So, yeah, we're going to talk about the material context, or better said, context in plural of text-bearing objects. So, first of all, let's make a scoping exercise and see what we mean by material context. So we are talking, as Gabby said, actually, about, we're always talking about inscriptions or seals or coins or papyri or manuscripts. And as philologists, we always pretty much focus on the text that these artifacts are, carrying. But we also need to focus on their materiality, and materiality not only meaning their physicality in a way. So what here I defined as the context of production of the artifact, but also, for example, the discovery context. So where and when this object has been found, but also, and something which might perhaps not ring a bell when we talk about materiality, the context of its publication. So we're going to talk today about actually the three, let's say, major axes. So first of all, the context of the production of the artifact. And, for example, material and materiality, such as dimensions, but also technique of executions, origin, and so on and so forth. Further, we're going to talk about the discovery context. I took the liberty to call it like that. So origin, provenance, for example, archaeological context, if any, but also acquisition, which is a, let's say, thorny topic. Further, we're going to talk about the actual publication of what we are of our text-bearing objects, and publication meaning also licenses, agreements, permissions, but also funding and sponsors, or also competing interests. We're going to talk pretty much, generally of all these things. And Daria, in the second part of this talk, is going to present a case study on this respect. So bear with me with some, let's say, theoretical aspects, and then let's say the most interesting things are going to come later. So first of all, I would say let's see what where and if we expect to find this information, and if we do, in which, let's say, in which context. And this actually, this is, as you see, I didn't separate between a print publication or a digital one, because the concept is the same. And we will argue today that having the possibility and the means of doing a digital publication must oblige us to be able to find as user, and to provide the user with this kind of information as, creators of the edition. So I kind of, let's say, went into myself and thought, okay, where do I expect to find this kind of information? So in terms of the context of production, so if I want to learn the material of this, of the, I don't know, the object that I'm making the edition of, or the dimensions, or the technique of executions, in the best case scenario, I would like to have this information in each entry. So in each edition, I would like to know that this seal, let's say, it's made of lead, or that this coin is made of gold, and it has been struck, it has been cast, it has been engraved, printed, and so on and so forth. And once again, in the best case scenario, I would like to have this in a structured metadata rather than in a commentary. So I would like this information to be very, very clear on the printed page, or on my screen. And as you can see here, right now we're talking about display. We're not talking about data models. So bear with me. Second of all, the context of, let's say, the discovery context. So the provenance, the acquisition, circumstances in which these objects have been found. So also in this case, I would say I would like to find this information in each entry. And once again, also in structured metadata rather than in a commentary. But, and we will see this later in a couple of examples of printed editions, if the data is homogeneous. So if we have, for example, a whole collection of coins which has been acquired in only, let's say, one spot in one go, then perhaps we will have this information, if it's a printed edition, in the prolegomena or something like that. Because, coming from a printed publication point of view, if you have to repeat the same information over and over again for, let's say, 3,000 times, which represent the 3,000 items that you're editing, then perhaps it's better to do it just once. Let's see if this is true. Further, the context of publication, so licenses, agreements, permissions, and so on and so forth. Once again, ideally in each entry, but realistically, let's say it like that, either on the homepage of the corpus that we're publishing, or let's say in the about page, or if we're talking about a printed edition, in the prolegomena, or also not even displayed, but embedded in the raw data, because you might want to choose not to display some information, and it is completely up to you. So let's have a look at a couple of examples. These come from the inscription of Roman Cyrenaica, so a digital publication. And as you can see here, an Epidoc-based and FS published paper publication, of course, digital publication. And here, as you can see, we have very structured metadata. I mean, they're structured also in the XML file, but also in the display. They make a very good impression. So it is not like it's not a fluid text of commentary, but it's very well separated. So we have, for example, sandstone blocks or part of blocks. So we have the material, the materiality. Then we have the way in which the text is executed, the layout of the text. So we're still in the very physical aspect of the inscription. Then we have dimensions, but also, as you can see here in the lower part of the screenshot, we have the find spot, the original location, and the last recorded location. So we have all the information regarding the provenance and the origin of this inscription, which in this case is still in situ, but it's not always the case, as you might imagine, also for smaller objects such as seals, papyri, manuscripts, and so on and so forth. In terms of the context of publication, in this very example, so the inscription of Roman Cyrenaica, you have here on the home page of the web of the corpus, you have information about the license and the funding, as you can see here in the screenshot, and all of this information is also embedded in each XML file. But as you can see here, it is not displayed on each inscription, and it is rather referenced to on the home page. I thought, okay, let's also have a look at at some printed publication, and I went, to my area of expertise, which is Byzantine sigillography, and I took a couple of examples. So in the first one, you see that we have the, let's say, the inventory number, we have the information about the publication, if it is already published or not, some information regarding the materiality of the object, such as the description of state of preservation, but also diameter, and so on and so forth. So it is actually also very structured, even if it is a printed publication. But you can see, for example, here from the diameter information in the upper publication, so in the Byzantinische Bleisigel in Österreich, we have both the diameter of the field and the diameter of the whole object. Whereas in the second example, which comes from the Sceaux des Musées d'Istanbul, we only have the diameter of the whole object. So these are like slight differences, which actually do not impact the publication, but you can still see, some inconsistency. And here in the French example on the bottom of the page, you can also see the what in Epidoc would be the alt identifier, so the alternative identifier. Here, I would like to underline that, it from me that these are publications of Byzantine lead seals, but actually from the metadata, you wouldn't actually realize this, because in these publications and in all actual publication, printed publication of any sort in this case, the information on the material, for example, on the object type, on the technique of execution is not given. And in this case, it is understandable because, for example, in both examples, we are talking about Byzantine lead seals, so just one text-bearing object for the whole book, let's say, which only are constituted by lead, so we only have one material, and which are always struck. So we have, let's say, three pieces of information, so object type, material, and execution technique, which would be extremely redundant if said in every if written in this case, in every edition. But something which I found very interesting is the acquisition history and provenance of, in this case, of the collection from Turkey, so from Istanbul. It is not, as you can see here, it is not written in every entry the way I would like it to be made, in a way, but it is written in the prolegomena, and it is also very nice that this has been done, because both acquisition history and provenance of the collection had to be, was not available, had to be reconstructed through very thorough archival work, because it hadn't been documented in the previous decades. So when you will see this publication at the very beginning in the introduction, you have this very, very long table with, as you can see there, code d'inventaire, so the, let's say, ID number, the provenance, and also the modality of acquisition. So if it has been confiscated, you see there, if it has been bought, if it has been excavated. So it is very, very well done. Plus, bonus point, it is bilingual. You have it both in French, which is the language of the of one of the author of the publication, and also in Turkish. So, having said that, how would we deliver this kind of information in Epidoc? And let's start with, let's say, the production context. So, you will be aware of the Epidoc edition template, and if you'd like a refresher, we will put in the comments some of the many sessions that we had in Sunoikisis regarding this very topic. That's why I'm not going to go there too long. But I would like to show you what we meant before by structured metadata. So when we're talking about the production context of a text-bearing object, we're talking pretty much about the support description element of the Epidoc template. And as you can see here, they are already in bold. We have the support, the material, the object type, and the dimensions. And let's take this inscription from the Roman Cyrenaica as an example. And as you can see there in the yellow square, you have pretty much all of this information written there, but it is actually more structured than that in the Epidoc way, let's say. So in the machine actionable way of writing this this kind of information. So in the support description, we have the everything which is related to the physicality, to the materiality of the text-bearing object. So we have the type, so the type of object, the condition, so the state of preservation, for example, the material, dimensions, and also decoration, if any. And you could write it like that, for example, with a prose, so in prose pretty much, but in making it like that would not make it actually machine actionable. This is only human readable and not machine readable. In order for us to be able to perform also some queries in terms of materiality of the object, we might want to tag marble with material, steel as object type, and dimensions as this, for example, width, height, and depth, and also the decoration. So this is the way in which we make our let's say description of our material context of production, machine and human readable. And as you can see here, there's a breakdown of all the elements that we've been talking about. And this is just to say that in terms of explanation and of description of materiality of the inscription, of the seal, of the manuscript, you name it. Epidoc and also TI have a very granular, I might say, way of encoding and of marking up this information. And this, I'm going back one second. So this kind of markup, first of all, as I was saying, makes it machine readable, and second of all, it makes some queries possible that wouldn't be like that if we were just writing a prose prose paragraph. So for example, here you might be able to perform queries such as, for example, give me all the objects in my collection which are made of marble. So you would be able to filter your corpus by by some elements, if I can say so. So also very important is the way in which we, let's say, try to let's say mark up the information regarding the discovery context in Epidoc. So we're talking pretty much about what in the Epidoc template is the orig place, so the origin place, and also all the provenance with various types, as we're going to see right now. So once again, the same inscription of from the Roman Cyrenaica, and here you can see that we have a find spot, a general find spot, we have a find date, and we also have a more precise find spot. So we have Cyrene, so Kyrene, and we have the Temple of Apollo and also the year. We do not know which was the original location, but we do know the last recorded location, which is the British Museum in London with registration number so and so. So we have a lot of information that can be encoded quite precisely. So we have different types of locations that we can point to, and we have pretty much the three of them in this example. So we have the original location, so where, let's say, the text-bearing object was born, if I can say so, which was its first location. Then we have the find spot, so where it was found, and also the last recorded location and or modern location or locations. So because this object, I mean, let's not always think about very heavy stone slabs inscription. We can also think about smaller and more portable objects, such as, for example, seals, and they might have traveled throughout the world pretty much. So the original location might be, or the find spot might be, completely different from the modern location. In this case, for example, if we're talking about the original location, we have the so we are in the Epidoc template in the history part, okay? So because we are talking about the history of the object that we're doing the edition of. So we inside of origin we have the auric place, or the original place, but also the auric date, as you can see there. However, we can be even more precise when we're talking about locations in general, and we can refer to a gazetteer or to an authority file. In this case, there's this amazing gazetteer which is bound to the Greek Cyrenaic and Roman Metropolitania. But there's also more general geographical gazetteers, like, for example, Pleiades or geonames that you can refer to. Other than the original location, we also have, as we were saying, the find spot. So once again, this inscription was found, I mean, in Cyrene, but west. You can see from the screen. So Roman house west of the Temple of Apollo, and so on and so forth. So we would use what in the element that in Epidoc NTI is provenance, right? However, the schema has been written like in a way that you have a type for the provenance, and in this case the type which, let's say, refers to the find spot of a text-bearing object is the type found. So once again, you can write it like that with a p element, so with a, let's say, paragraph or prose, but you can also be more specific and tag, for example, in this case, this specific Roman house with a place name, once again referring to a gazetteer, an internal or external, if available and if wanted. And also the, I know we're talking about locations, but also the find date might be interesting to be mentioned and referred to. And you see that we do that with the when attribute. And also I was saying the provenance can have several types, and in this case, since it has been moved from the original from the find spot, now this inscription is in the Bath of Trajan, fixed to the wall of the Frigidarium in 2008. So we know that this text-bearing object has been observed in 2008 in this specific place. And once again, you can do the exact same thing as we did before for the find spot. So you can pinpoint the year of the last recorded location with an attribute when, and also tag the Bath of Trajan with a place name and referring to a gazetteer. So as I've been saying before, we have a very thorough way of, thorough possibilities in a way to better define the provenance of our inscription. So we already have the possibility of being very thorough, very explicit, very precise, and very, very transparent. So the four provenance types, so the four types for values of types, better said, that we can have in provenance are found, observed, not observed, and transferred. So I will not go too deep into that because also in the required readings we have the guidelines of Epidoc, and in particular the provenance and origin ones. But as you can see from this slide, these types and subtypes are very well fitted for inscriptions or text-bearing objects moving, disappearing, being seen 100 years ago and now you don't know anymore what's with them. So there's a whole lot of possibilities in which you can roam the guidelines of Epidoc in this regard. And when we're going to have our discussion, I would like to make a proposal on this in this term, on this topic regarding the provenance type transferred, subtype sold, because the text-bearing objects with which I personally am working, so once again, Byzantine lead seals, but also coins, but also Kleinkunst, but also you name it, they have been, recently, even, always increasing, sold at auction. So we have the possibility of pointing to a an auction catalog with a hammer price, and be very, very transparent about the acquisition method. But we're going to talk about this later, because now we have the publication context, which is also extremely interesting, and this is where it gets tricky in terms of of epidoc encoding. And this is something that I think we should really discuss together. So the information regarding publication context we saw before is pertains to things like licenses, but also funding and availability of the publication and prior scholarship, for example, but also if you have some competing interests, who is the funder body, and if they themselves have competing interests with what you're doing, and so on and so forth. And this kind of information, it's not that easy to encode, because it is actually not that objective in a way, in my opinion. So let's see together what it is all about. So first of all, even though this is not yet in the let's say standard epidoc template, if I can say so, these are TI elements that definitely should and will be used. And in order to let's say to give the possibility to the user to see which kind of license they can use, or they can use and reuse pretty much your data for. So in this case, as you can see, this is a snapshot of our project here in Cologne, and you have the element availability, which, as you can see, these are the explanations taken from the TI guidelines. So the availability pretty much gives you information regarding the availability of a text. So if you have any restrictions or copyright status, or in this case, licenses. And the element license with, as you can see on the screenshot, also the target to the specific license that we're talking about, contains, of course, information regarding license or legal agreement that apply to your data. Here we already have the first problem, is a license or a legal agreement. So up to where, let's say, we can write here what kind of agreements or what kind of permissions we have to publish our material. But this is once again something that should be discussed later all together. And of course, if you've been following us for a bit, you know that we've already talked about the Creative Commons licenses. And if you don't, please go to the very first session of this semester, and where we touch upon licenses a tiny bit. So in this case, you can see that the license that has been applied is quite restrictive. It is the Creative Commons attribution, non-commercial, share alike. Further, something that is not yet embedded into the epidoc template, but can be definitely done because these are all TI elements, is the sponsor and funder. So to be completely honest, I wasn't. I'm still struggling with the difference between the two of them, but I think it all boils down to the fact that the funder is exactly, as you can see on the slide, is someone responsible for the funding of a project. So where there's also funding in the context, and sponsor might also not be using and or giving you funding for your project. But please correct me if I'm wrong, because it is really a question of semantics. So in this case, once again, a snapshot from our own project, and we have the great luck of being funded by two funding bodies, so the DFG, Deutsche Forschungsgemeinschaft, with the identification number and a CORESP, so a link, let's say, to the grant number, and also by the Agence Nationale de la Recherche. So it's a binational project. And so also in this case, it is quite, let's say, open and explicit what who is funded, and if you go there and click on these links, you can also see, for example, the amount of funding allocated to both partners. So it's very, very transparent. So something that I would very much like to discuss after the end of also Daria's presentation are these less objective but equally important features that are pretty much left out from the strict encoding. So some ideas that we wrote there are, for example, agreements, so legal or paralegal agreements, but also permissions, or if you have some competing interests or conflict of interest, and perhaps some more. So just a very quick recap, and then I will hand over to Daria and her very interesting case study. So first of all, I think that I hope, as a matter of fact, that to have shown that providing information regarding the material context of our text-bearing objects, meaning production, discovery, and publication, is very, very important because it makes our edition more transparent. But also, when we're talking about digital edition, it is incredibly. It's important. You can't really avoid that this information is delivered in a machine actionable form, and also, if in the best case scenario, in a widely accepted standard, because this of course minimizes the risk of obsolescence of your data. But this is valid actually for everything, so this is not really just relating to the way of encoding the material context. Is for every scholarly digital edition. Further, even if a piece of information is valid throughout the corpus, such as, for example, the example that I made before, that lead seals produced by striking. So we have a whole book where you would always have to write object type seal, execution technique struck, and material lead. Still tag it in each XML file, because each edition might and also should be used and reused outside of its context. Or also, as I wrote quite provocatively on the slide, because I just want to check an edition real quick, I won't read the prolegomena. So I might not want to go to the about page and to read that this is a corpus that talks about this and that. But the data, of course, in this case is more structured, and it can be easily repurposed by you or by others without loss of context or information. So each file should be understandable by you and by the machine on its own, without having to remind yourself that this was indeed struck and not cast. Further, and on this I will conclude, I think that whatever we do, we definitely be driven by the principle of transparency and explicitness. And also, going back to the last thing that I said, even redundant information, like, for example, lead, seal, struck, is always better than unclear or missing information. And not only for purposes of reusing the data, but also because it should be the clearer the better. And I think I am done, and perhaps let's end over to Daria. And I really hope to have a very fruitful discussion after that.
Great, thank you. How can I share now the screen? I don't know whether. Okay, great. Thank you, Gabby. So first of all, many thanks for invitation to participate to this exciting session. And it's always a very good opportunity to look at your own studies from a different perspective. So today I will talk about rubrication, punctuation, Ethiopic manuscripts, first in general, but then also on using one case study. And I will try to demonstrate you how this material context of production of a written artifact can influence also our understanding of the text. So this is a short outline. So first I will introduce you to the rubrication of Ethiopic manuscripts, and very important on the rubrication and workflow of workflow of the production of a manuscript. And then we will go to a case study. And in this case study, I will introduce you into a manuscript tradition of one particular text, and we will have a look how rubrication and punctuation can influence our understanding of the text on the one hand, on the other hand, how it can influence also building of a stemma for this text tradition. And at the end, I will also tell a couple of words on how we encoded so far rubrication in Ethiopic manuscripts, and what are potential, what further ideas can we develop for encoding of this phenomenon. So first, rubrication, and I know that rubrication is actually a word that might have different meanings, but in Ethiopian studies, we actually use rubrication to indicate addition of text in red ink. And rubrication of Ethiopic manuscripts can have various patterns. So, for example, there could be incipits written in red ink, saintly names, titles of the works or subtitles, sometimes digits or their elements, punctuation signs, and also their elements, and many other elements of the text. So, for example, here I have a snapshot of a manuscript where you can see a rubrication of an incipit in an Ethiopic manuscript. So the first two lines are red, then black lines, then again red lines, and again black lines. So it is one of the common patterns for rubrication of an incipit. Here, for example, we have on the one hand rubrication of punctuation. I hope you can see me showing like this punctuation sign, which consists of 4 black dots, but then also of red elements, and also a rubricated subchapter in the text. And here it is another example where we have a digit with some rubricated elements. So what is important about rubrication in Ethiopic manuscripts? So I think it might be a common feature with many other manuscript cultures, but we know for sure that this addition of rubricated elements in case of Ethiopic manuscripts was in most cases a separate step in manuscript production. So meaning that first the text in blank ink was copied from a Vorlage, and then the text in red ink was added. And this I will also discuss later, whether it was always copied from the Vorlage or probably not. So you can imagine that this workflow, when a scribe had to leave some blank spaces for rubrication, like first to continue the whole text in black ink, and then like take red ink and fill in the gaps and add all these red elements, had actually considerable influence on the final representation of a copied text. My ideas on the I'm very sorry that this slide looks so weird. My ideas on the influence of this fabrication in manuscript tradition, I want to present to you on the case of using a case study of the Chronicle of John of Nicaea. This is the text that I'm currently working on, and I have discovered that actually rubrication, some of the manuscripts indeed can influence not only my understanding of the text, but also my stemma codicum of this textual tradition. So I want to tell you a couple of words on the Chronicle of John of Nicaea. I will not go into many details because it is a text on which several monographs can be written. But today I will only need to give you a couple of facts that will help you to understand the importance of the manuscript tradition of this text and also about its structure. So this text was composed in the 7th century in Egypt, so most probably in the Coptic language, but then it has survived only in the Ethiopic version. So in a very late Ethiopic version, which was actually produced like almost 1,000 years after the original composition. It is attested so far in 5 Ethiopic manuscripts, and what is very important is that this text is divided into 122 chapters. You might have remembered that I told you that the rubrication of titles or subtitles, chapters or subchapters are like an important element of the Ethiopic manuscript culture. Here shortly are the 5 manuscripts, but today first we will talk only about 2 of those manuscripts, both kept in Paris in Bibliothèque Nationale de France, and both like rather late manuscripts from the 17th century and from the 18th century. And we have we're lucky that at least one of those manuscripts is digitized in color, and another manuscripts I had an opportunity to check just a couple of weeks ago and to make note on its rubrication patterns. So we might have a look first on the rubrication in manuscript under the number 146. So let's have a look what is rubricated in this manuscript. You might see that there are several elements, such as like the elements of the digits, but also the elements of punctuation, which are rubricated throughout the text. So like on this big picture, it might not be well seen, but so I have made like a small zoom in, and this is a pretty this is like a pattern that you can see throughout the text. However, there are 2 folia on which we have no rubrication. So if you you might sure, but then if we zoom in, you can see that here, this particular case, it should be folio 105 recto, that there is a digit, but there is no rubrication. So there is this punctuation sign, the 4 black dots, but there is no rubrication. What has happened is actually that during the rubrication of this manuscript, because this rubrication actually resumes after these 2 folia, that the scribe, while rubricating the text, simply flipped 2 leaves instead of 1. So this is, I made a small picture of you how it might have looked like, so that it was simply a mistake during the production, during this additional step of adding rubrication to the manuscript. This is, again, a very interesting case where we can be sure that rubrication was added later to the manuscript, that it was not a parallel process of writing both types of ink, but that first the text was completed in black and then the red elements were added. In a case of another manuscript from the collection of Antoine de Badi, number 31, we have another case. We have first a part of text which contains rubrication, and I could check that indeed the rubrication is there. However, starting from folio 124 verso, there is no rubrication at all. And you might see here that some space was left blank, so where the scribe actually intended to add rubrication, but never had a chance to do it. It is interesting that this is a big manuscript, so it contains not only this text, the text of the Chronicle, but also other texts. And the following text, which is not the Chronicle, which is another one, actually, again, has rubrication. So, which was like a different unit, different production unit, and probably this means that the rubrication took place before the manuscript was bound, actually. So punctuation in Ethiopic manuscripts is actually a topic that still needs to be studied. There is a classification of different punctuation signs in Ethiopic manuscripts provided by Dr. Denis Nusnitsin. So there are different types of word dividers and different types of sentence and section or text dividers, but actually we still have not a good idea what actually these different punctuation signs mean and whether they're highlighting the grammatical structure of the text, or probably sometimes they rather signal some sort of they are made to stress on words when the text was read out aloud. So we don't know actually the particular role of these punctuation signs, and that's why the study of these punctuation signs is extremely important. And it is also very important to document them when you produce a text edition, because this is very important information for the life of the text in the society, how this text was read, and how people wanted to perform this text. So, but what I have found in case of the Chronicle of John of Nicaea is that in the manuscript number 146, there is, like, on the right side, you see the punctuation signs with like 4 black dots, which do not always have red elements. You see that here it doesn't have red elements, here it does, but you still can distinguish between them, and you can still just see that these are 4 dots, like something very different from the 2 dots here. So you see that, well, this is a punctuation sign. This is not like a simple word divider as here. But this manuscript also contains another type of punctuation sign, which you see here. And these are 2 black dots with 2 additional red elements. And unfortunately, without rubrication, you would never distinguish this sign from this sign. And these, like, 2 dots are just a normal word divider. It doesn't have any special meaning. But here, apparently, it does have some special meaning. That's why the scribe added these 2 red elements. But unfortunately, if there is no rubrication, we would never see where the scribe wanted or intended to have these additional red elements. So to sum up a little bit these ideas first, that rubrication was in most cases a separate step in manuscript production. This we have seen from the case where the 2 leaves were just flipped, or in another manuscript where a scribe just stopped rubricating and left like almost a half of the text not rubricated, so meaning that it was indeed a separate step of production. And rubrication took place after the text in blank was copied from the Vorlage. So rubrication in any case was an additional step, And we don't know whether the scribe actually used the Vorlage, or like the manuscript that he copied, to add rubrication or not. So we don't know it for sure. So probably, like judging from this case where we have this like skipping of 2 leaves, we might imagine that actually the Vorlage was not necessarily used in the process of rubrication, because I can hardly imagine that somebody comparing 2 different manuscripts would not see that he missed 2 leaves or 2 pages to rubricate. So this I don't see as very probable. And also the missing rubrication, as I have demonstrated, might result in missing information on some punctuation signs. So, but rubrication is not only about punctuation signs. Sometimes rubrication is very different in the process of production from mere copying. Because in case we have, for example, some logical patterns, for example, numbers, like in this case, we have 122 chapters, and these 122 chapters have to be simply numbered. So in this case, a scribe doesn't need to use a Vorlage to make rubrication. He simply follows a logical pattern to produce this rubrication. I think this is a very important point, because as we might, I will show you an example from this manuscript tradition, that we will take a chapter 60 as an example, and have a look how this chapter 60, the title of this chapter 60, is represented in different manuscripts. So in one manuscript, this manuscript that we have seen several times already, the chapter 60 is represented as 60 and is rubricated. In another manuscript from London, it is the same, it is 60 and rubricated, as well as like another manuscript from Paris that we have also seen. An interesting case is with the manuscript from Rome and with the manuscript which is in Addis Ababa, but I use the Siglum for its microfilm, which is kept in Collegeville. In case of manuscript D from Rome, the chapter number is 60, but it is not rubricated. And in case of manuscript G, it is number 28 and also not rubricated. The problem is here that I consider manuscripts D and G to build a group of manuscripts, so they seem to be very much related to each other. So a manuscript D is, however, much younger, and it shares all errors with G, and it has no rubrication. So basically, my idea is that what does this say for us as like for philologists and for stomatologists, or people who want to know how the manuscripts in different texts relate to each, how texts in different manuscripts relate to each other. I argue that rubrication, if it follows a logical pattern and represents a separate step in manuscript production, has a very special place in establishing relations between manuscripts. Because copying, when there is no rubrication and it is simply black ink, is one process, and it has a very different value than rubrication, which can follow a pattern, especially if it is a logical pattern. What do I mean here is that if we have something that was rubricated according to a logical pattern, and we have an arrow in one manuscript, and this part is rubricated. And let's say we have in another manuscript this, like the so-called correct reading, and which is also rubricated. I would say that in this case, we cannot consider these two readings to be a disjunctive arrow, a so-called disjunctive arrow, because they might represent a very different process. They might represent not the process of copying, but simply a process of following a logical pattern. However, I argue that if there is a manuscript, whether it is rubricated or not, and it contains an arrow, whether it is rubricated or not, but there is a manuscript which seems to derive from this manuscript. But instead of this arrow, it has a correct reading which is not rubricated. It must be evaluated as a disjunctive arrow, because because in case if it is not rubricated, it is in any case a process of copying and not a process of later addition of elements based on logic. So this is one of my ideas to which I came during the study, and that's why I also had to evaluate my stemma, because I first thought that manuscript D derives from manuscript G because it shares with it so many arrows, and I thought that, well, actually the fact that it has the right numbering for chapter is not that bad, because it might be that the scribe simply counted those chapters. But then I realized that it's very hard probably to copy the text and at the same time to count the chapters in your head, or to come back like every time and check what was the previous number. And I think that during copying it was not very probable that a scribe did something like this. So that's why I think that manuscript D in this case already had a correct numbering for this chapter. That's why the scribe who didn't even intend to rubricate was simply following the Vorlage, and so that this process was pretty mechanic. The rubrication in Ethiopic manuscripts has actually many strategies for encoding. There is a project at Metzahev based at the University of Hamburg, where we do have different ways how to encode the rubrication in Ethiopic manuscripts. So, for example, there is a possibility in text encoding to mark up the text which is written in red ink, or there is a possibility in the description of hands to specify which ink is used and what rubrication pattern is used. Lacking rubrication can also be specified in manuscript description here and there. So there are different possibilities how to do that. However, I think that this process, the way how it is right now, this encoding strategy is a little bit unclear, and it is very descriptive. So maybe we can go further and develop a strategy which will be a little bit more explicit and transparent, as Martina also said, that this is something that we have to work on. And we can switch our focus not from description of what is there, but to focus on the workflow of the production of the manuscript. So probably we could encode, or we could include a specific statement, an explicit statement on the absence of rubrication. So meaning that there was no intention to rubricate, or whether there was intention to rubricate, but at a certain point the scribe just gave up or whatever, because now these different pieces of information are scattered throughout the description of a manuscript, and you have to collect them from here and there and then make this to make this additional step by yourself and to explain to yourself why there is no rubrication or why this rubrication discontinues. Then this is also something that I have addressed in my contribution that was kindly mentioned by Gabby at the beginning, that sometimes our statements on the presence are maybe explicit, but our statements on the absence of something are not really explicit in descriptions. So by now, at least in the case of Beta-Metzaheft, we are not always sure if there is something is not mentioned, something like, for example, red ink is not mentioned in the description. Is it because there is no ink, or because the encoder just didn't want to spend time on describing rubrication and so on? I think also that identification of such punctuation signs that I have shown you, which are distinguished only by rubricated elements, could be an important thing to describe, because in this case, it is potential loss of information in case of a discontinued rubrication of the manuscript. And I also think that standardization of encoding for lacking rubrication, for example, to be more specific about the lack of rubrication in general or only of some elements, could be of very much advantage. And I think also that probably we could develop a strategy for the presence of logical patterns in the rubrication, something that I have shown you with the chapter numbering, which I think just represents, again, a very different step in the manuscript production, and which might potentially have a very, like a big influence on the schematics of the manuscript tradition. So this is so far everything that I wanted to tell you. I don't know whether it was clear, but I hope so.
Thank you, Daria. Yeah, and thank you both. Yeah, that was some really useful sort of parallels and complementary sort of examples there. One thing that struck me that was towards the end of each of your presentations, you talked about the importance of documenting how you use the markup, and that's something that's it's very easy to neglect to do. You both gave an example. Martina, you gave the example of the overlapping potential values of, for example, the tag sponsor and the tag funder. They could mean exactly the same thing. They could mean slightly overlapping things. TEI is very rich. How you encode something is a little bit up to interpretation. So it's imperative that we explain what we mean when we tag one thing as a sponsor and another thing as a funder, right? And we say that somewhere in our explanation of how we mark something up. Likewise, Daria, the point you made towards the end, when I haven't mentioned the ink, does that mean the ink is unremarkable, or does that mean I couldn't be bothered? And there's always things that we can't be bothered to do, and that's completely correct. We have to leave some things uncommented upon, otherwise we'd still be encoding the first page of the manuscript 10 years later. So we have to say what we are marking up, so that someone looks at it and sees that there's no reference to the ink and says, oh, there must be no replication up here. So that's one aspect of documentation. It's meta documentation. You're documenting your documentation somehow. That I think is you've both given wonderful examples of.
If I may, I just wanted to say that I was so happy to listen to Martina's presentation, where she said that better to be redundant than unclear, and this is something, I think, which is extremely important, because otherwise we have to go through the manuscripts again and again if something is not really clearly stated. Especially in the case of absence. I would so love to have as many statements on the absence as possible, because I sometimes really don't know, okay, is it not there in the description because it's not there? or is it not there in the description because just like I don't care? So this, I could like probably somebody else like will come later and to complete the description. Okay, this is also, I can understand this is a good approach, and I think that people should be free to decide what they want to encode entities and whatnot, but at least to have this possibility to mark up the absence, I think would be a very important.
If I may comment on that, this has been a very, very long ongoing discussion in our project, because once again, dealing with seals with very, varied provenance and almost never a fine spot. So what do we say? Do we delete? Let's say, should we not even, tag the find spots as such, or should we write find spot unknown? So I really like, the statement, like also the lack of information is information per se. So you have to because as you were saying, Daria, so if I stumble upon an edition where I find acquired in then you jump to the edition. So why aren't you telling me the find spot? Is it because you're lazy or because you don't have this kind of information? So it's and also something that I have to say our colleagues from the CCH very, very gladly helped us to do, because coming from the from Byzantine philology and Byzantine sigillography, turned into DH person, but there's still some some bridges that have to be, some gaps that have to be filled in. We were in order to speed up the process, we wrote an accessibility style sheet, creating a transformation scenario for something like, whenever a provenance type found is empty, print unknown. Which of course, was very easy and practical for us, because we wouldn't have, to write that in every time. However, then in terms of reusing the data, if someone sees this XML file without the related style sheet, then why is the element closed? Why is the element empty? So yeah, that was like in terms of best practice, and the same thing. In terms of unknown, not applicable, it's also understandable in a way. But since we were lazy, we did the same reasonment also for the three examples that I made. So struck, seal, and lead, which was a very, very big mistake in semantics, of course, because you might see, for example, very old file, object type, empty element. So what does it mean? So either you have to document very thoroughly everything, but in that case, I wouldn't even dare to say that, because it's just plain wrong. Yes, but I diverged too much to what we were saying, but still, just to say that each file, each edition should be comprehensive in a way in its own, and also I very much like the tagging of the absence of things. It's also always very important.
Yeah, what you say, Martina, is a really excellent point, and it links up with a sort of throwaway comment I made in my first comment after Daria finished, which is that you can't do everything, right? There's things you have to decide not to do, and one of the reasons that in the book it doesn't say this is a seal, this was struck, it was made of lead 600 times, is because that would be 3 more lines of information on the page 600 times, which would be several more pages of absolutely meaningless information. But the other reason is that the person writing the book doesn't want to type it out 600 times, right? When we're working digitally, we don't have to type it out 600 times. If you've decided that you're going to say, material brass and material wax for the very few instances where it's not made of lead, and all the others you leave blank, then at the end write a script which says everywhere I haven't given material, add material lead. and add it in the underlying data, because even if you're not going to print it on the page, because the underlying data is likely to last longer than the website, right? The XML files will still work in 10 years' time. The website is very likely not to. Horrifying as it is, websites do become obsolete very quickly even today. So likewise, if you almost never know the provenance, then sure, leave provenance blank, except for the few where you do know it. But then afterwards, instead of writing a script which will print provenance unknown on the page, write a script which writes provenance unknown in the XML file or in your database or wherever is your underlying data. Likewise, if you know that you've recorded rubrication every single time that it occurs, then write a script that goes through all the files where it says nothing about rubrication and add rubrication none, right, or something like that to it. And that's something that can be, it's something you assume everyone will understand, but given that as soon as you're gone, and as soon as this is published, right, and you're working on something else, you're gone effectively from the reader's point of view, that is no longer understood by everybody. And working digitally, we have an easy way to make that explicit. Let's do that. And it's easy to say, we don't always do it, but
Woo. Let's try. No, yes, but I mean, it's what you say. It's, I mean, completely right. Also, I mean, this is the way we did that, as a matter of fact. So we said, take this and substitute it with that throughout the corpus. So it's as easy as that. So yeah. And also, I mean, the way in which, I mean, it is also important today to give this kind of information also because you might want, I mean, but this is something, I mean, which hasn't to do with today's topic actually, but having, the possibility of doing our editions online in a very highly structured and highly hierarchical way gives us the possibility of searching for things that we didn't even know wanted to be searched in a way. So you might want to perform some statistical analysis on how many wax seals we have in the 11th century second half. I mean, and by doing, by being explicit in what in your tags, in your documentation, and everything, it's very, very easy and straightforward. So, however, if you only tag, so let's make the example, the other way around. If you only tag the material wax when it's there and you don't tag anything, you don't write anything, you don't even write the material element when it's lead, then it will be like a kind of fake statistics, because you would find pretty much only wax. That was a very nice time, the 11th century second half, where everyone was sealing in wax. So that's that's something that it's easy, and it's made even easier with the means that we have, of course. Yeah.
I mean, many years ago, when I was working on one of the very first Epidoc projects, I was working on someone objected to something in the markup, and they I think it may have been the spurious exactitude incident, where the date said something like 133 when what we meant was early 2nd century, something like that, and I tried to argue that what's in the underlying markup doesn't have to be what the historian is expecting to see, because it's the human readable code is going to show something else, right? And someone else pointed out that the markup is not completely divorced from the human readable code, right? So having something different across the two is actually misleading. And I would now totally support that argument. I would argue that I am human, and I read Epidoc files more comfortably than the transformation of it into HTML, right? So what I would have implied in my throwaway comment in 2002 or whatever it was, that a human isn't going to read the epidoc file. A human is going to read the transformation of it onto a web page. Well, I don't do that. The sort of flippant way I explain this to my epigraphy students is that while they all write in epidoc and then they transform it in FS to see what it looks like, I'm like the rebels in the Matrix. Okay, I look at the green letters floating down the screen and I can see the epigraphy behind it, because and yet I'm human, and so the human who's reading the code needs to be able to see something true and meaningful as well, not just an absence which somewhere some code transforms into something else. And while there's all sorts of shorthands and that we can use, that are machine readable shorthands, their codes, their URIs, their links to authority lists and things like this, that's fine. It doesn't need to be human readable in the sense that it needs to be in full sentences, because those of us in the stepping out of the matrix can also read URIs, but it does need to contain true information. Not just things that can be assumed in one way or another. And yeah, sorry, that was just I said entirely nothing new over what you just said, but it's just agreeing with you.
And I mean, also, for example, in order to be consistent with yourself, which is something, I mean, we're always talking about, bigger projects where more than, let's say, 2 people are involved. So, I mean, you have to get into the mind of like more than 2 people in terms of encoding, but also, I mean, you and yourself. I mean, you, how often does it happen that in the framework of the same month, not even the same year, you write something in a way and then something not the same way? I mean, you have to be consistent. That's why we just to say, I mean, to have documentation, to be able to go and check what you yourself wrote some time ago, but potentially forgot because you're human. And yeah, so that's that's not really much regarding the absence, but rather let's say the presence of the documentation from early on. It will change. It will be different at times, but at least fixed in a way. Yeah.
Aside from the question of how we encode some of these sort of subtle distinctions in the code, in the XML, or whatever underlying code you're using, I think one of the most important things that came out of both of your presentations was this question of recording information that we aren't necessarily in the habit of recording. Possibly because it seems obvious, as we've just been talking about, but possibly, as in some of Martina's examples, because it's stuff that we might be uncomfortable with recording, such as the price we paid for an object on the open market, or the nepotism that we used to get permission to publish a certain unpublished text, or things like this. These are all absolutely essential. And if a colleague came to us privately and said, "So how did you get access to that?" then we would admit to it, and we'd say this is what it was, or I bought it for 22 euros, or whatever. But I think we need to sort of have the courage of our convictions and say those sorts of things. And I think this is what Martina was arguing. And I think having co-written a paper with Martina about this recently, I know that this is what she was arguing. We need to be a lot more open and transparent about those sorts of things. That not only what we've done, but what other people have done, what special privileges have been allowed, and what sort of ethical dilemmas we have had and we've overcome, or we've decided aren't ethical dilemmas after all, or we've decided are less important than getting this text out there, or whatever, in so doing, or we haven't overcome, but we've been constrained for whatever reason to do these sorts of things. We sort of have to, as academics, be willing to be a little bit honest about. And I think it's easier for some people than others, and I'm not denying that some people are in a position maybe to find that sort of thing slightly easier. I'm a tenured, senior academic. I'm unlikely to suffer career damage at this stage in my life for confessing that I was a bit uncomfortable about the cultural appropriation in this piece of work. But whereas some people are at a more a vulnerable stage of their career and so forth. But in an ideal world, these are the sorts of things that we should be thinking about when something's in a private collection. How much can we get away with making common knowledge, public knowledge about that private collection without upsetting the person whose collection it is, and therefore losing access to any of their stuff in the future. But what sorts of things can we be open about, and how much information is being lost to historians, to other scientists in our field, with every piece of information that we withhold. We know that we can't expect them to take our word for things. We can't just appeal to authority. We haven't been allowed to do that since the 18th century. But there are things that if we don't tell them, we are sort of asking them to appeal to authority, to believe in our authority. Take my word for it. I can't tell you in whose possession this is, so you can't go and look at it. But I've looked at it, and this is what it says. That some of those things, if you put them like that, they're not okay, are they?
Yeah, definitely. And by doing some research on that topic, I kind of stumbled upon something, but I don't know if it's correct what I'm about to say. So in Epidoc we have provenance type transferred, and then there you can have bought, sold, given, whatever. We also have acquisition, which we do not use in Epidoc, but rather, it's in TI. And I was wondering if there was, I was trying, to make to encode as a seal at auction, just for the sake of the example. And yeah, I couldn't find a explicit tag for price. I had just to fiddle with N, something like that. So I was actually baffled by that, because we have so it's, I think it's it's indicative of something like that. TI for manuscripts, Epidoc for inscriptions, coins, seals, whatever. These things are bought, and they don't magically appear in collections and museums. And I think it might be even more explicit if one might be, willing to add a very precise tag, pointing to the price at which something has been acquired. But I've browsed through the TI style guidelines. Perhaps something is there. So if I'm saying something wrong, please correct me. But I to the best of my knowledge, I really couldn't find anything. And yeah, I thought it interesting.
I can imagine that there is some ethical question. I know it, for example, especially from Egyptology and so on, that they try to avoid to mention anything like that and anything like price, because it's only, makes the price then on the black market even higher. for other project, for other objects.
Right.
So this is like a very difficult question, and I know that especially Egyptology and cryptology, they have a very very developed guidelines in how to deal with these issues, simply because you can provoke people like to to put those
you're
things on the black
completely right.
market.
But on the other hand, what stops me, editor of a seal, to write in prose, but at this auction, also without writing the price, but putting a permalink to that auction, to that lot, and the user is going to be able to see. Because I mean, nowadays pretty much all auctions are e-auctions, so online auctions. So, and that's a whole other Sunoikis session. But I see like all the ethical constraints and concerns. But I mean, in terms of being like descriptive, it would be better. So I see Gabby saying bye. And so I would think that, I mean, we are 1 minute out over our time. What do we have?
Do you want to say about the exercise or
yes, let's say a few words about the exercise. So as you see on the link that you have on your on the chat, we have two as usual options for the exercise, and one pretty much relates to Daria's portion and one to mine. Feel free to do only one or to do both, and this goes as always primarily to my students and to all the future students that are going to use this session later than May 2024. And so differently from some of the exercises that we've had in the previous sections, this one is pretty much you have to think long and hard about what you would like to see, what Epidoc or TI allow you to do, and so on and so forth. So you will really have to dig deep into your needs and the needs of your discipline. Having said that, just a very quick reminder, let me open the agenda for this semester, that next Monday, so Monday 20th, we are not meeting live. And on Monday, May 27th, we do have a session, but it's not going to be live. We refer to to another session already done in the framework of Sunoikisis, and it will be about text visualization and Voyant tools. So the next time that we're going to have a live session is going to be June 3rd. So in 3 weeks, pretty much, where we are going to have other colleagues from Hamburg. There's a whole lot of people from Hamburg in these two sessions talking about the Etymologica project. So having said that, I would say thank you, Daria, so much for accepting the invitation. And I will see you in 3 weeks, right? Yeah.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.